So thank you all for joining us today for Actsafe Safety Association's Code of Conduct webinar presented by Stacey Forrester of Good Night Out. Very excited to be having everyone together today for this webinar. So a little bit of housekeeping before we kick things off. So for today's purposes, we just wanted to make clear that our intention is to create a safe space for exchanging knowledge and supporting each other in solidarity. We welcome questions throughout this morning's workshop, and we will be having time left at the end of the session for a Q&A period. So if you're providing questions throughout the session, we will just make note of them and address them in as best as we can at the end of the session. You're also welcome to kind of make note of your questions and then actually put them in the chat once we reach that period of the webinar. Before I proceed, I'd just like to take a moment for an important Indigenous territory acknowledgement. Actsafe Safety Association would like to acknowledge and honor that our workplace and classrooms are located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Kikite, Stalo, Hulkaminam Treaty Group, Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Chemainus peoples. We encourage everyone that attends our webinars or our classes to take a moment to check out a website with the URL down at the bottom, native-land.ca. There you can find out a lot more about where you work, live, or play. And it's very accessible, really effective tool, tons of important information to be found there. So we do really encourage everyone that trains or participates in our offerings to check out that website so that we can all become more educated and ultimately work towards greater truth and reconciliation. All right, a little bit more housekeeping. So this session is scheduled to be approximately 60 minutes, and then we'll follow that with a Q&A period of roughly 30 minutes. In our past webinars, we have had at times more questions come in than we had time to answer in that 30-minute period. So depending on where we stand at the end of this Q&A period that we have scheduled, I may just acknowledge to the room that we've reached kind of what was scheduled to be our end of time and that you're welcome to leave. But if there's still some unanswered questions that might seem like appropriate for us to spend a little bit more time on, then we may do so and invite you all to stick around to your discretion. All participants will be muted throughout this webinar. Please use the chat feature to submit any of your questions, and we'll make note of them again to address at the end of the session. For your convenience, there is a closed captioning function available. If you'd like to enable that, simply click Settings, then the Accessibility tab. And under Closed Captioning, you can click the checkbox to enable. If you have any issues, you can please advise us in the chat room, and we'll have someone try to troubleshoot to support you from our end. And finally, a recording of this webinar will be available on our website, and a link will be emailed to you within a week after this session is finished. Right, so quick introductions. Again, my name is Dagan. I am a safety advisor here at Actsafe. I've been in the motion picture industry professionally for about 12 years. I have an acting background. I'm a UBCP actor member. I grew up in the community theater community of Kelowna, BC. I have a Bachelor of Arts degree in Emergency and Security Management with the Justice Institute of British Columbia, and I've been certified as a workplace psychological health and safety advisor with the Canadian Mental Health Association of British Columbia. It's my great pleasure to have with me today Stacey Forrester of Good Night Out. Stacey is the co-founder and education director of Good Night Out Vancouver. She is a former community health nurse with a passion for creating safer, more equitable arts and culture communities. She facilitates workshops about sexual violence prevention and response for the nightlife, hospitality, and live music sectors. She is a harm reduction manager for Base Coast Music and Arts Festival and was recently nominated for a Live Music Industry Award in Community Impact. Very well deserved. A few more slides about Actsafe before I pass this on. So for anyone not entirely familiar with us, we are a not-for-profit health and safety association dedicated to supporting British Columbia's arts and entertainment industries. We've been around since 1998 and have been serving our industries by providing resources and training to employers, workers, and supervisors in an effort to achieve a healthy and safe workplace for everyone involved. We are always here to provide information and relevant to best practices around health and safety in the arts and entertainment industries in British Columbia. And we look forward to helping anybody who reaches out to us. Our vision is for British Columbia to have the safest and healthiest arts and entertainment workplaces in the world. Our mission is to prevent and eliminate workplace injury, illness, and death by providing world-class occupational health and safety and well-being programs to the employers, supervisors, and workers in the BC arts and entertainment industry. Our core values are safety, education, accessibility, collaboration, and innovation. Right. Now, a little bit more on the topic of the day. So for this Code of Conduct webinar, our learning outcomes, our intended outcomes are for everyone to recognize what a code of conduct is and how it is used, to delineate what is not in a code of conduct, to have greater awareness on how to approach writing a code of conduct of your own, and to explore how to increase awareness of your new code of conduct once it's been developed. And finally, just some food for thought and discussion topics. We'll be exploring what is a code of conduct, why is it necessary to have a code of conduct, how to write a code of conduct for your event and or your team, how to implement a code of conduct, how to communicate a code of conduct, and then finally we'll wrap up with our Q&A session at the end. And without further ado, I will pass the microphone on to Stacey.
Thank you, Dagan. Hello, everyone. My name is Stacey. Thank you for spending the afternoon or potentially evening, depending where you are joining from, learning about one of my favorite things to talk about, which is a code of conduct. So I just want to build on Dagan's amazing land acknowledgement. I am joining from unceded Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territory. This is where Good Night Out's work is deeply anchored to, and we also just encourage everyone to, as we enter into the space to talk about safety, really reflect on how that links to your own practices of decolonization and liberation in your daily work and life. So if you are hearing about Good Night Out for the first time, we're also a nonprofit society. We've been around since formally on paper, probably 2017, but we did start a little bit before that. And our whole mandate is to build community capacity to address, prevent, respond to sexualized violence. We do focus on nightlife, music, and hospitality. That's kind of been our niche that we've become known for. And we really do this through three main areas of work. One is our education program. So we host about 80 workshops a year currently about different topics related to sexualized violence. We do outreach. So we have a stationary team that's here in Vancouver. They operate on the Granville Entertainment District. And then we also have a team that's available for hire. So different music festivals or late night events or community events can hire us to have a kind of consent-informed violence prevention outreach team at their event. And then our third bucket of work is just general advocacy to eliminate gender-based and sexualized violence in our society. And our AGM is coming up. If anyone is interested in learning more, I got to do a little plug. I can post the link to sign up for that. We always like guests to come to our AGM and learn more about what we do and how we can support you. A little bit about me, although that intro was very comprehensive. So like I said, my name's Stacey. I use she, her pronouns. I graduated nursing school over 20 years ago. Since then, my focus has really been on supporting people who use substances. So my passion is harm reduction, nursing. I then went back to school at UBC to do a second degree in gender studies, which really means I think a lot about health and about gender and how those two things intersect. My time at UBC was really spent leaning into particularly sexual violence at music festivals and treating sexual violence at music festivals as a public health issue. And that really did inform the birth of Good Night Out. What else is on here? I do have a dog. She will probably make her thoughts known about a code of conduct at some point. Unfortunately, that's just the realities of working from home, so she may make an appearance. I am also an author and writer, and like was in the other slide, I have worked for Beast Coast Music Festival for about this is my 11th year with Base Coast. So I run the harm reduction program. We have a team of 100 volunteers on my team alone. We have a very comprehensive risk reduction program that I'm very proud of. We offer on-site drug testing using FTIR technology. It's really fabulous if you are. I know Actsafe connects with a broad cross-section of sectors, but for any of you who are joining from the music festival lens, definitely feel free to visit Base Coast and kind of see how we do it. And if you're astrology minded, I'm a Virgo. I have 5 Virgo placements in my chart, so I'm very much a Virgo through and through. So how to contextualize a code of conduct? We consider at Good Night Out a code of conduct a foundational tool in creating what we call protective spaces. So before I can get into what a code of conduct is, I'm going to first explain a protective space. You may be familiar with the term safe space or safer space. This is just an upgrade to that term. We're starting to phase out the term safe space or safer space because we feel it's not descriptive enough and it's not action-oriented enough. So we are opting to use the term protective space because we believe that creating spaces that resist and prevent and respond to sexualized violence requires action. And there's a lot of violence in the world. There's a lot of variables in the world we can't control. But we believe while you are bringing people together, either as a workplace or as an event or a film set, you have a responsibility to protect the people inside that space. And this is not something that happens by accident. It requires 4 walls of effort: the wall of policy, the wall of comfort and skill, the wall that is created by your strong culture and values. And then a 4th wall of protection is the industry or community buy-in to creating these protective spaces. And so this code of conduct that we're going to embark on a journey talking about today fits in the policy and enforcement wall. It is a document that contributes to that wall of safety. And I think we're going to, touch a little bit on comfort and skill because I'm hoping you'll become more comfortable with this idea of a code of conduct and more skill around writing one. So I would even say we're building up 2 walls. Over the years that Good Night Out has been doing this, we come in contact with a lot of workplaces and a lot of events that are in a bit of a crisis mode because an incident of workplace sexual harassment has happened. And the workplaces may be wondering why. I don't understand why. We have a really great policy. And so I'm hoping that this graphic illustrates that if you only resource the wall of policy, sexual harassment and violence will still seep in because you need these 4 walls of protection for your space. Okay, so let's get into it. So what a code of conduct is. A code of conduct is a short, public-facing document that summarizes your behavioral expectations and lets people know how they can get help or report concerns. All right, so the key word in there for me is short and probably public as well. It really needs to fit on 1 page at a reasonable font for it to be read, to be engaged with. A code of conduct is for any setting where people are going to be sharing space. All right, so a code of conduct is useful for venues, for festivals, for musicians who are on a touring, a multi-city tour, as well as their crew, for jam spaces, management teams, promoters who throw events or festivals. Code of conducts are also useful in digital spaces. So social media, Instagram pages, for those who are in music, if you are maybe managing an artist and they have a fan Facebook group or Discord channel, codes of conduct are useful there. And really what we're trying to do when we create a code of conduct is we're creating a tool that helps foster conversation and creates a container around how people are acting. Code of conduct is not. So a code of conduct is not a replacement for a more detailed sexual harassment, bullying and harassment, respectful workplace policy. It complements that. It's a part of it, as we'll see, but it is not a full comprehensive policy because it doesn't outline training. It doesn't outline investigative procedures. Those are requirements of your respectful workplace policy. It's not always a legally binding agreement. I kind of have to put that in there as a disclaimer. It definitely can be. And so anytime you're creating documents for your team, for your space, always, always, always get your legal team, your legal advisor to review and give you feedback. A code of conduct is not proof of a safer space. All right. So what this means is you write your code of conduct, you put out up on the wall. That does not mean that nothing negative has ever happened or ever will happen in your space. Right? It's not evidence of it being a space that is free of sexual harassment. It's not proof of anything other than you're resourcing and you care about these things. It's not a standalone tool. All right. There are many complementing tools you need. The deeper policy, the staff training, all work along with this. And it's not a silver bullet. Sometimes when it comes to the conversation about sexual violence or even gender-based violence, we like to think there's one solution that will eradicate this problem from society. And unfortunately, it just doesn't work like that. Eliminating gender-based and sexualized violence requires people doing many things all of the time, and this is one of the things. And this photo on the screen here, I'll describe it to you in case you can't fully see it. It says, in case of emergency, draw a door, which if you're familiar with the movie Beetlejuice is a reference to Beetlejuice. There is a chalk door drawn on this brick wall. And what I always say is a code of conduct is important, but if it is the only tool you're using, you haven't taken a training, you don't have a more detailed policy and investigative procedures, it really is the equivalent of drawing that door on a brick wall and calling it a fire exit, right? It's not very functional. So it works complementary to many tools. It is personally where I recommend teams, especially smaller teams, start. When people leave a Good Night Out workshop, they've had 3 hours of training, they say, oh, I'm a bit shell shocked. I don't know where to begin. This is where I definitely recommend people begin. If you're going to do any tool after this workshop, start with the code of conduct. So the why do we need this? Here are some of my favorite reasons why a code of conduct is helpful. It helps remind all people connected to your space or your event or your team that you are taking safety seriously because it's visible, right? It's a visual prompt that you care about safety. It creates a frame of reference for behavior. So if you have to correct someone's behavior, or you maybe have to, in the music festival context, potentially remove someone, you refer back to the code of conduct. You are being removed because you didn't behave in line with this document. Another why it serves as a deterrent. Research has shown that people who do go to events or gatherings to prey upon people select the ones where it looks like people aren't paying attention, where it looks like maybe no one cares, no one's interested. And so visible documents like a code of conduct can act as a deterrent. I've already mentioned the ejecting someone. It lets people know how to get support when needed, which we definitely want our staff, our volunteers, our patrons to know. And definitely in doing this since 2017, I've definitely seen a significant shift, especially post-COVID when it comes to the entertainment industry, and like times are changing and people are expecting this as the bare minimum. I think there was a big push post-COVID to really stimulate the local economy and support local and buy local. And this is kind of a part of it. I think that there is an increased interest from patrons and even prospective employees to ask if the space or the job or the workplace they're entering has documents like this. Just to kind of build on that a little bit, in 2022, Good Night Out did an audit of some of the major festivals in North America, and we wanted to find out how many had a code of conduct or a more detailed policy or some type of information about patron conduct on their website. Really, we were looking for any reference to sexualized violence and how events were preventing them. And we actually found that more music festivals reference safety around what is problematically called a totem or a sign to bring into the event than spoke about a safety around sexualized violence, which was a little bit jarring. And if anyone's interested in this full audit, I will share my email at the end and you can email me and I can send it to you. So back to the code of conduct. Ideally, it is one page. It is something that's made public, so it is something you share. As I said, it forms the foundation of your policy. And really what we're trying to do when we create a code of conduct is we're trying to outline or describe how we want people to feel and act while they are working with us, while they are volunteering with us, while they are visiting our space or our event. Our code of conduct should have examples of the types of behaviors that will be addressed. Ambiguity helps no one. Ambiguity becomes very hard to enforce, right? So you do need to include specific examples. We obviously, in a short document, can't list every single behavior that would get someone potentially spoken to or disciplinary action or removed, but we can do some broad strokes, general examples. It needs to state how people can get support. And it becomes something that your team, your volunteers, your crew, your staff, your subcontractors, and if it is a music event, your artists sign, right? So it can be sent out with volunteer or crew applications. It can be sent out with advancing. It can be sent out to new hires. The scope of it, so ideally it applies in physical and digital spaces. And it also needs to be visible inside a space. So my kind of 3 C's around this are, is it clear? I definitely recommend any documents you make that are public facing, you run through a readability app. Anything like this you create should be able to be understood by someone at a grade 8 level of comprehension. So is it clear? We're not using jargon. We're not using abbreviations. Is it clear? Is it concise? Have we said it in as short, as few words as possible? And are we acknowledging that there's a consequence? Right? The consequence is up to you, depends on the industry, your resources. But do we name that if you do not act in this way, there will be a consequence, action will be taken. So when it comes to writing it, these are kind of my key questions that I encourage people to reflect on. And I have compiled these into a document for you that I will share the link to at the end, so you don't have to panic about writing all of these down. So what values do we want our space, our shows, our team to uphold? And some of you may already work in a workplace that has these. Maybe you've worked with a consultant or you've gone through a process where you already have your values. This is another extension of those. Does our code of conduct reflect the work we have already done around our values? The why. So why is creating a code of conduct important to you? Why do you even have one? Maybe doing a brainstorm around some words that describe how you want your patrons to feel, right? So if you are an event or a space, or you could even extend this, how do you want your volunteers after they work at your festival or your event? How do you want them to feel? And create a list of words. What are some behaviors that are absolutely not welcome? Where is your line? What would get a person removed or spoken to or disciplinary action taken? What realistically can you enforce? How would our team, patrons, community describe safety at our event? And my hint around this one is you need to ask them. So this is kind of a side tangent, but for any of you who do events, you should always be asking about sense of safety at your event, right? And then use that feedback there. And then how can people get help or support? So there's kind of 2 ways you can use these questions. You can bring your team together as a group and host a session and work through them and come up with answers. Or an interesting way to approach this is to create a form with these questions and send it out and see what you get back. And perhaps where there's commonalities, that those are things to pay attention to. And so your first pass of answers to these questions become an initial code of conduct. You have the skeleton of it by working through these questions. For those of you who maybe have a background in psychology, this is where we tap into that. Part of why codes of conduct are an important tool in protective spaces is they really do kind of work on this idea of priming, right? So the concept of priming is when priming works by activating certain neural pathways in our brain that are associated with a concept. So if the concept is safety, right? When a person is exposed to a stimulus, for example, a poster about safety, it activates neural pathways in our brain that are associated with safety, with how it feels to be safe. It might make you think of another event that had a poster where you felt really safe, right? So as soon as you put up a poster outlining your code of conduct and your patrons, your team, your volunteers see it on the wall, or they see it on your website, or it pops up when you go to purchase a ticket, those pathways around safety become more accessible, and people's brain starts to process the concept of safety and just have it more accessible in their brain. And in this case, the information around their own safety and the safety of others becomes the forefront. So what you're really trying to do is, before people set foot on your set or at your music festival or in your space, by getting the code of conduct out there and in the public and on your social media, you're creating those neural pathways of safety. You're making it so that by the time they enter into the space, they've thought about how it feels. How will I know I'm safe? What will it look like? um, you know, Security, where is security? Thinking about all of these important things connected to safety. A code of conduct done well will help prime people to expect to be treated with respect, know that there are safety tools in place, and will remind them that the team will have their back. We want to avoid, however, the other side of this coin. We want to avoid people being primed to expect that harassment is the norm, right? And this is a common concern I hear from people is, oh, if we put up posters about sexual assault, people will think that sexual assault happens here, right? And so this is why it's recommended that you open your code of conduct with that statement about how you want people to feel and act in your space. So an example here is if a code of conduct opens with, we want people entering our theater to feel, respected, valued, and included as an opening line. You are then priming them to think about these things. Whereas, look at this poster on the screen. Imagine you opened your code of conduct with, which one of your mates is the most vulnerable? You are priming them that that space might be one in which they're vulnerable. Do you see the kind of difference I'm getting at? And that's why that opening line of the code of conduct is so important, because that's the first bit of information that they are receiving. A personalized example is one of the first music festivals I went to when I was quite young. I went into the porta potties, and there was all these posters that were don't rape people, don't sexually assault people. And that was it for me. I was on edge for the rest of the music festival. I was like, why did they even have to put these up? Why are they using that language? Are there people who sexually assault people here? However, if I had stepped into that porta potty and it had been, we care about your safety, here's how we want you to feel, that stimulus would have anchored in a different pathway in my brain. So where do you start? It really depends on how large of a team or an event you are. If you're a little do-it-yourself DIY event with minimal production lead up and a very small team, you can start with just a code of conduct. That could be enough for you for your one-time show that, you're kind of renegade, you're not doing a lot of planning. As soon as you become more of a team, a team that's on the smaller side, but it has more production time, or you have your own physical space of some sort, whether it's a theater or, a jam space, I recommend you do your code of conduct and also your response path. Map out how you're going to respond if someone reports a violation of the code of conduct. As soon as you're a larger team, you have longer production lead up, you're actually a registered business, you need to have your code of conduct as part of your legislated anti-harassment policy, and or a safer spaces policy. These two things are related. The harassment policy, you'll see a lot of spaces have a harassment policy, but then also a safer spaces policy. But the one that is legally required out of here, as you all probably know, is your bullying and harassment policy, sometimes called a respectful workplace policy. So this is how it fits into these things. So I'm going to run through some common pitfalls or some common errors that I see. Well-intended, but these are things we want to try to avoid as we are writing and rolling out our code of conduct. Pitfall number one is being ambiguous, right? So I want you to really think about what certain words mean. Vague language leaves room for very subjective interpretation. So if you're able to at all, I definitely recommend avoiding undesirable, inappropriate, unacceptable, or the word vibes. I've seen vibes on a code of conduct poster, like good vibes only. Really, what do these words mean? My threshold of what is inappropriate could be very different from a handful of people, right? We all may interpret these words differently. So really think through what do these words mean? Again, grade 8 kind of comprehension. How would they understand these words to be interpreted? As soon as something is ambiguous, it becomes difficult to enforce, right? If I'm telling someone something's undesirable, their behavior is undesirable, what does that mean? What is your example? What is your point of reference? And so again, this is why we want to give examples of what some behaviors look like to help make it clear. Another pitfall, this one perhaps is controversial, is maybe being over ambitious and incorporating the phrase zero tolerance into their code of conduct. And I'm not saying the phrase zero tolerance is necessarily bad. I am saying I want you to really think this through. What does zero tolerance mean to you? How might the public interpret it? I have learned that when the public sees a poster, a code of conduct that says zero tolerance, the general public assumes that the person who is in violation of the agreement will be removed. That is kind of a general consensus. That zero questions asked, someone will be removed from an event, which any of you who work in events know that it's not always super easy to remove or ban a person sight unseen, right? So kind of looking for how do you reconcile what you mean by zero tolerance and how the public might interpret it. Can you commit to all staff removing 100, people 100% of the time? What are you going to do if staff don't see the behavior with their own eyes, but it's reported, right? So it could result in there maybe being some incongruency around expectations and your own internal policies. And then what if you have zero tolerance, but it's your staff or your volunteers violating the code of conduct? What if you say, this event has zero tolerance for sexism, but then your headlining act, if it's a music festival, is up there and they get on the mic and they say something super sexist, right? What if it's your talent being disrespectful to your staff? What if it's your friend violating the code of conduct, right? So zero tolerance is not necessarily bad, but I just want people to really realize what they're signing up for and make sure that expectations are calibrated around what this means. I also am a believer that some behaviors, if we think about sexual violence as a spectrum, there are some behaviors on that spectrum where it is way more powerful and profound to talk to the person saying the sexist thing, making the joke that makes light of sexual assault, having a one-to-one with them, talking to them, trying to mentor better or turn it into a teachable moment than just ejecting them from a space, right? And if you feel that your team values those things too and has those skills, then maybe zero tolerance isn't the approach for you. Another pitfall here is lacking intersectionality. And I feel like if there was a buzzword for 2023, intersectionality might have been it. However, I feel a lot of people have heard it, but they haven't, dove deep into what this term actually means. So to get us all on the same page, when we're talking about intersectionality, we're talking about a framework by legal scholar, lawyer, doctor, professor Kimberly Crenshaw, who actually coined this term in the early 90s. So it's been around much longer than it maybe kind of has recently popped up for some. To better understand how aspects of a person's identity combine to create different but simultaneous modes of discrimination that are inseparable from each other. Okay, and so how this ties to the idea of a protective space is the recognition that all of us right now in this moment sit on a bunch of different intersections of identity. Some of those intersections include gender, age, socioeconomic class, ethnocultural background, level of education. All of these things create and inform our experience of the world. And so when I step into a music festival or, a fringe festival or a workplace, I'm carrying all of my identities with me. And how safe I experience a place to feel is informed by all of my identities. And so what this means is that a place where I feel totally safe, affirmed, validated, the experience of someone else who sits on different intersections might be totally different, right? So how safe a space feels for me will vary maybe from a woman of color, a person with disabilities, a non-binary, person with from a different socioeconomic background. So really what we're asking is safe for who? And so sometimes, people will slap up a poster and it will say, this is a safe space. Who decided that? A person who sits on the intersections of identity that gives them a lot of safety in society, right? Who are we protecting? Safe for who? So we need to make sure that when we're putting in these measures and these statements, we are thinking intersectionally. And really, as you're, putting safety measures in place, one of the best things that you can really do about is think who is potentially our most vulnerable person here? Who potentially, and put in safety measures for that person, and everyone will benefit. And then a common pitfall is lack of communication. So people have written a beautiful code of conduct, but then not done anything with it, right? So a code of conduct and that priming effect we're trying to achieve really only works if people know about it ahead of time. So we're going to put a code of conduct on our website. Another option could be to have patrons click yes to the code of conduct in order to finalize their purchase. You post it at entry. You can do a social media campaign. If you are a larger scale space or event, you can print your code of conduct up on handbill size flyers and give them to all staff and volunteers to use as needed. You can attach it to contracts and then make sure that everyone in your space knows about it. So make sure that if you're using contract security, they're aware of it. If you have vendors, make sure all of your staff know about it. There's nothing worse than someone going to a person and saying, hey, this thing happened to me. Can you please help me? I saw the code of conduct posters, and the contract security or the person working at this particular gate are like, huh, what are you talking about? I've never seen that before. We don't want that to happen, right? So we want to communicate out. And then a common pitfall I see also is waiting to create this document. We don't really need one right now. We're not that big. We don't have incidents happen. We're just a small team. And my advice here would be it's way, way easier to respond to conduct concerns when you are prepared, because it gives you a path. Our brain is way more rational and way more reliable when we are being proactive than when we are being reactive, right? So our brain just works under better conditions when we're saying, you know what, we've never had an incident, but let's create these documents now, than having an incident of perhaps harassment and say, oh gosh, where do we start? We got to create all of these things, right? If your team or event will involve more than one person, you're big enough to need a code of conduct. And then also a reminder here, I think a lot of people in, especially events, arts and events, start as just a group of friends who want to open a little gallery, or a group of friends who want to work on a small podcast. And so they think they don't need it because they're all friends, right? And my mantra here is good contracts make good friends, right? So having these terms of agreement that you will hold each other accountable to can help avoid rifts in friendships that are also working relationships. So to wrap up for our final 20 minutes, I'm going to share a few examples and also offer critically kind criticism or compliments. So these are real life, pulled from the internet. So a little disclaimer, if you are connected to the team of one of the ones I shared, all of the feedback I offer is just to, give us opportunities to grow. I bet you if you created a code of conduct next week, by next year it would evolve. These are living, breathing documents. They're not set in stone. You're allowed to do an update after you have a specific incident and you found you needed to tweak it. So just take these with a grain of salt. Okay, so I'm going to read it out. So case study number 1. The following actions will result in a warning and/or immediate ejection from the festival. Offensive or abusive language, obscene or offensive gestures, including the use of offensive imagery and symbolism on banners, signs, and other visual tools. The participation in an activity that is insulting or harmful to oneself or fellow guests. Violence or engaging in harmful behavior to self or others. Damage, destruction, vandalism, or theft. Disrespecting or damaging the festival grounds, urination or defecation in the river and or outside of a proper public restroom, the possession of alcohol not served at our bars, the sale of illegal substances, accessing restricted areas without adequate credentials, and creating potential fire risks. Any individual who violates the code of conduct may be immediately, in all capitals, removed from the festival grounds and have their festival wristband and parking privileges revoked without refund. Law enforcement may be notified. Please contact altitudefest@gmail.com if you believe you've observed or experienced a violation of this code of conduct. And Altitude Music Festival will assess the situation and respond as soon as possible. Please remember, notifying the festival does not constitute or replace a notification to local law enforcement. Yeah, so I'm seeing some things come in through the chat that are right in line with feedback I would have about this one. So let's advance the slide and take a look here. So my kudos. This is generally a strong code of conduct. All right. It includes more than just behaviors. I love the use of imagery or signs that could harm people. I like that it has an email address to report concerns. So overall, this is a strong document. If I were to offer any kind criticism, it would be some language could be refined. Offensive, harmful, we might want to lean into a little bit. I think it runs the risk of being vague. I think I saw a comment that said unwelcome as too vague, to which I would agree. Unwelcome to whom? Maybe immediately removed. I feel like it could open up some expectations from the public that you may not be able to kind of enforce. So I would maybe change this to we reserve the right to remove people rather than saying people may be immediately removed. It's a small tweak, but I think the way that tweak lands with the public is important. Another criticism would be does not clarify who it applies to, right? And I get the sense in reading that it's limited to patrons. That's my takeaway. So I would like to see that clarified. Is it something that also applies to volunteers? It's missing how to get help in the moment. So yes, there's an email, which is great, but what if I'm in the thick of the dance floor at this music festival and I need help? So I would like a line of, in the moment, how can you get help? A little reminder of what that looks like, what color is security wearing, etc. And then I just want us to reflect on the mentioning of police in the code of conduct. And I don't have a solid bit of guidance either way. I recognize that obviously there's a line of behaviors for which law enforcement should be involved. But I'm not sure that that line needs to be referenced in the code of conduct. I feel that we know that different communities have different relationships and sense of safety from law enforcement. And so could we be priming them to feel unsafe seeing that there, right? So just a little reflection to include. All right, this one. No homophobia, no violence, no racism, no hate. This is one this or versions of it is one I tend to see a lot, and I want to name that there are very good intentions behind something, clear and simple and putting this up. Okay. So yeah, when I do see this, no one is, I feel like, ill-intended or anything like that. It comes from a good place, but let's unpack this one a little bit. If I were giving it kudos, I would say it's short and accessible, which is always good. So it's got the clear, it's got the concise, which is good. And my kudos would be it's a start. However, I do have a fair bit of kind criticism on this one. It is way too vague. It's way too vague. I think the average person would see this and say, oh, good thing I'm none of those things, but then would very likely, have a behavior that someone else could interpret as being sexist or being hateful, right? So it's way too vague. There is no consequence, right? We haven't named like what happens when there is those things. What is the path? I think there's a general, if we're thinking about how the public interprets these things, there's a lack of connection to those behaviors, right? I think, and what I mean by this is I acknowledged earlier how there's a spectrum of sexual violence. There's a spectrum of sexual assault. There's a spectrum of sexism. And so the average person could look at it and say, no sexism. Okay, great. Like, I'm not sexist. I was raised by a mom. But then they'll act in very objectifying ways, right? So the general public lacks a connection to what those things actually look like. Microaggressions surfaces for me, right? A lot of people realize that extreme racially motivated hate is a racist thing, but might not realize how everyday kind of slights also reflect racism. It's missing how to get help, and it's generally overall missing a lot, right? There's room for subjectiveness in here potentially. This one would be very hard to enforce. That's the thing. When you're this vague, the work of enforcing that document falls often on security or event staff or management. And this one would be a tricky one to enforce because of its vagueness. Okay. This document, they framed it as house rules, which I love. This is another thing too. You don't necessarily have to call it a code of conduct. So we hope that people of all genders, abilities, cultures, and sexualities feel welcome here. As such, any form of discrimination will not be tolerated. This can include, but not limited to, racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, fatphobic, or ableist comments, sexual harassment, bullying. Patrons should consume alcoholic beverages in a responsible manner. Impaired and intoxicated guests will be removed in a prompt and safe manner. The Goodwill, so this is from the Goodwill Social Club out east. The Goodwill will not tolerate violence, theft, vandalism, or any other harmful acts. We reserve the right to remove any patron creating an unsafe environment. We wish to make the Goodwill a safe, welcoming, and fun space for patrons, employees, and performers alike. If at any time you are made to feel uncomfortable or unsafe, please let an employee know or email us. So I have a lot of kudos for this one. I really like this one. I think this one is great. The fact that they've managed to put it on something that could be printed on a postcard and be read is amazing. So to get specific, it opens with a positive, which I love, right? We're trying to go for that positive priming, that positive association. So that opening is very strong. I love that it said we hope as opposed to we are, right? They recognize that it is not on them. They're prioritizing intersectionality. It is not on them to say we are a safe space, right? We hope, we're working towards. This is what we're trying to do. It's got that broad scope. It has examples, which I love, but it states like can include but not limited to. It names the consequence, so we reserve to remove people. There are a few ways indicated to get help or report, so the in the moment and the email. It ends on a positive note too, which I love. So they kind of bookend it with a positive. And as I mentioned when I opened it up, I do really like the creative name. I like that the house rules, I think, is a throwback to like tavern times. I really like that. If I were to offer some criticism, I found and this is criticism light, the impaired and intoxicated guests a bit interesting, specifically the impaired. Like, am I to believe that anyone in that space who is impaired is getting removed? I highly doubt it. It's a bar, it's a pub. So I would probably tweak that to say, we adhere to our serving it right or whatever it is. And as per law, over intoxicated guests will be safely removed, right? They're not getting rid of every drunk person. That's just not how bars work. And then you'll notice the email goes to the manager. And then that just prompts me to think like, what if my manager is the problem? Do I have an alternative, right? But overall, this one is one of my favorites. I often refer to it. I think this is the last one, which means great, we're right on time. This one, or this version of this one. So you are entering a safe place. Let's have a moment to reflect on that. What do you think I might say about this one? Let's take a look. The kudos is you tried. You tried. You did something. And if I were to even be generous with some kudos, all right, we are really harnessing the priming, right? We're priming them that this is a safe space. However, moving on to the kind criticism. If any of these were the equivalent of the chalk drawing on the brick wall, it's this one. This one is not a super useful functional tool. So my first bit of kind criticism is there such thing as a safe place? And if you remember in the beginning, I talked about the shift to protective spaces. Part of the rationale for that shift is I don't believe that any space can be declared as safe for 100% of people 100% of the time, right? Do I envision a world where we have eradicated gender-based violence? Absolutely. Do I think we're anywhere close to that right now? No. So I don't think it's appropriate to be declaring any space as a safe space, right? And then this leans into that pitfall of intersectionality. Who decided that? Right? What intersections do they sit on? Because if they don't sit on very many intersections, it really isn't their place to declare something as a safe spot, right? Lacking that intersectional lens. Something that's missing is what happens when it's not. What happens when it's not a safe place for me? Another bit of criticism is this label, it's really not ours to decide. It's not ours as managers, as promoters, as coordinators, whatever our role is. It really is for the people who experience or work in or volunteer our space to decide, Just because we declare something as such does not make it so, right? And then there just isn't enough information in this. There's not enough asks. There isn't a call to action. It's just way too brief to really even get anywhere close to reaching our intended goals. All right, perfectly on time. This is great. So before we move into the Q&A section, if you utilize that QR code, if you have the ability to utilize that QR code, it will take you to just a folder where the slide deck and a little handout live. If you do not have access to the QR code, the link will be sent out in the post webinar kind of mail out, so you can access it that way. And then these are the ways to stay in touch with Good Night Out. Find out what we're up to, what events we're at. If you're interested in a more detailed training, email, and then our website, our social media channels. We are the most active on Instagram. We are not super active on the other two, but our Instagram is fairly active. We are usually quite often posting educational materials on there. And with that, I'll pass it back to Dan to open up the discussion Q&A part of this.
Wow, wonderful. Thank you so much, Stacey. You are a fantastic facilitator, and this has been a wonderful session. I have been taking notes, and I've heard you speak numerous times, and I'm just constantly blown away by your work. So thank you. Quickly just reviewing the chat. The only question that I've seen come up so far, and maybe we'll just hold for a moment in case people are just forming their thoughts and putting some questions down for us now, but someone had commented in regards to your review and criticism of the House Rules case study. They said, can we get that wording sent out after the workshop? And I think what they were responding to was your suggested revision to the impaired and intoxicated guests piece. So I don't know if you want to reiterate that, or I know you've got a resource that's to be shared with everyone, and I don't think it has that specific note. So if you care to say it again, or maybe throw it in the chat for the person who's particularly interested in that.
Yeah, totally. So you're right. The specific line I would use if I was personally tweaking that line is not in the resource I have, but I think that because, especially in spaces that have a liquor license, we know that there's going to be intoxicated and impaired people there. And so I would just say, the space adheres to serving it right legislation or whatever the responsible drinking is in your area. And as a result, over intoxicated people will be safely removed. I love that they included safely removed. I have seen a few of these where it's like over intoxicated people will be asked to leave. And my little harm reduction heart just like leaves my body there, because it's like, we're not putting vulnerable over intoxicated people out on the street because we have to. So I love that one includes the safely, right? So that to me prompts me to maybe expect or assume that Goodwill Social Club has a plan in place that looks out for their safety, that helps them get a ride home that's sober, etc., and isn't just like, bye, you can't be here anymore. So yeah, my advice there would just make reference to the provincial legislation around overservice, and say that your staff are trained to adhere to serving it right policies and protocol. Would be my little tweak there. Yeah.
Excellent. I see another question that's come in. It's kind of there was an initial comment and then kind of an add-on for a little bit extra detail. So first part was, what are some specific behaviors we can include in the code of conduct? And then there was an added note, especially with regard to consent-based sexual conduct.
Yeah, really great question, Jesse. I like to include, behaviors. My favorite line is, behaviors rooted in asserting power or targeting another will be addressed. This can include, but isn't limited to, touching a person without consent, repeatedly targeting a person after they've asked you or said no, or, asked to be left alone. harassing type of behaviors. Those are kind of my 3 buckets, right? So not honoring a person's no, non-consensual touching, and outright harassment. I do like the breakdown of examples in that Goodwill Social Club. I like that they included like body shaming, that kind of breadth, I think is really, really strong. But yeah, the touching, the harassing, and the not honoring a no is probably the simplest. If I had to pare it down to 3 categories, is where I would start. I like naming consent in it. I think that that is really important, is naming like not honoring consent, dismissing consent in there. I hope that one answered your question. There's so many things coming in now. I can also see them, so I don't know, Dagan, you want to pick the next one? Yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of going from the top down, but happy to have you pick out one if there's one that stands out to you. The next one chronologically, it's framed with a question mark at the end, but it's a little broad. It said possible suggestions start with it is our goal to have a safe, welcoming place open to all, and then list the expected behavior, consequences, and link to info and sources. I guess I get the sense that they're wondering if that's if you would say that's a great kind of opening line to start with a code of conduct.
Yeah, I think that's really strong. A small tweak, and some of these things become semantics or what we're comfortable with. So yes, overall, I think that's great. I like to use like we like to we're trying to create a space where people feel safe is what I prefer, as opposed to saying a place is safe. We want an environment where people feel safe. Small language tweak, but yeah, I think that Marco, that's a great opener. Yeah.
I'll read the next one. It's a bit longer. How do you approach clients, event organizers who do not understand the topic of social safety and might feel reluctant to it? I operate in Amsterdam, and now it is becoming almost a trend where festivals should have a safer space policy and implementation. But how can you approach them in a way to show that the code of conduct is not enough and that money and energy should be invested in this?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like get out of my brain almost. Like this is, if I had to name the top challenge of Good Night Out, it is literally this. You've synthesized it in a message, in a question here, is you're right. I think that unfortunately, in the time I've been doing this, public interest, industry interest comes in waves. And often those waves are tied to someone in a particular industry being called out, right? So whether it's an artist, a producer, someone in film, over the 7 years of doing this, if I wake up and I have 500 Twitter notifications, I'm like, great. Someone prominent has an allegation against them, and we're about to get really busy for a month with inquiries. The number of inquiries that convert to actual workshops will, there'll be a significant attrition. And I think that speaks to the core of this comment, is that it comes in waves. And how do we get the sustained, deep investment in safety? And I keep saying that if I do go back to school for a PhD, I think I would focus on trying to quantify the financial economic impacts of doing this work. I think under the realities of capitalism, that businesses just want to see how much more money will we make if we invest in measures. And so if I decide to take that leap, I will have that answer for you. But until I have that answer for you, I do really try to use that chalk door brick wall. Is that code of conduct is great. It's a great place to start. But these documents are only as good or as strong as the environment and the culture they live in. So yes, okay, you have a code of conduct. Do all of your team have the skills to support a person who's maybe activated and dysregulated and had something that feels very unsafe happen to them? Because you don't want to fumble that, right? So I try to make sure, like, great start. what else needs to be done so that we can truly live, breathe, and enforce this document. I also like to say that obviously, we've only spent an hour together, but I do have a strong anti-oppression feminist slant to my why of why I do this. But even if you completely disagree with that lens on it, it is a smart business move, because the more measures you have in place, from code of conduct to training to investigative procedures, the more things you have in place, the more realistic it is, one, that employees will stay. You will reduce turnover because you will have employees who feel safe, supported, welcome, included at work. If you are a business that has a front-facing patron aspect, patrons who don't have a long list of festivals they can go to where they feel safe to be themselves and all of their identities, and bring their partner and all of that. Right now in society, the list of options that truly feel safe for people who sit on a lot of intersections is not long. So if you create a space where a person who might be targeted or vulnerable in other places feels safe coming to your festival and feels safe dancing with their partner and having the full spectrum of their identity, not just safe, but like celebrated, that person's going to come back. They're going to recommend your event to their friends. They're going to, if you are a liquor serving space, if they know that they can like let their hair down and their guard down and take off that armor that they maybe have to have in other places, that gives you a competitive edge, because they'll also like drink more because they can relax. So if you rely on liquor sales, creating that conduct, that environment is just a smart business practice. So those are the two kind of areas I focus on. One, giving them carrots or cookies or whatever, like great start. Code of conduct is a great start. What can we do now, though? How can we deepen into this? And then do the money angle. But I wish I had like a totally sure answer for that one, because I would have solved a lot of Good Night Out's challenges.
Well, that was a great answer nonetheless. Looking at the next question here. How do we onset access a code of conduct? Does each department make their own?
Great example. So if you're a bigger team production kind of event, my gut instinct says it's more efficient and I think enforceable to create one that applies for all, but perhaps modify the examples of what it might look like and how to get help for your department. So there is kind of one general one for the production, and then, how this looks for costuming, who the get help person is for costuming might be slightly different, is how I would approach it. It's a lot of work to tweak it slightly, but or to change it totally for departments, whereas like tweaking it slightly, I think would be the most efficient way to approach it.
Next, what are some things you would suggest to safely eject folks aside from safe ride to where they're going? Also, have you seen the consent colored bracelets some places use? Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I think anytime, so if we're removing someone not for behavior, not because they're targeting someone, they're not touching anyone, but they're too intoxicated, they have to leave. Some general approaches are, I try to find their friends. So if I was able to notice that they were sitting back with a table full of people, and kind of work with their friends to create that safety plan. So this is something our street team does regularly. So in case you missed it in the beginning, our street team operates in the Granville Entertainment District of Vancouver, high concentration of clubs. A lot of our job is getting darling little angelic, just turned 19-year-olds home or to a safe destination so that they don't end up in the drunk tank, essentially. So some creative things we do around there, knowing that we're not a venue. So we don't have duty of care in the same way a venue does, right? Like a place where someone has been drinking has a legal responsibility to put their best effort into getting someone home. They haven't done that. So we are there to kind of support. If I'm able to, like if they're so intoxicated that they can't string together some answers to my questions around who did you come out with? What area do you live in? How are you getting home? Do you have someone I can help you call? If they're not able, if they're so intoxicated that they can't answer me, we do try to get into their phone. So either like, getting their finger on it, talking them through it, obviously, like, hey, I think that I might be able to help you, but I need into your phone. So if we can unlock it and kind of see who they were last in conversation with. And if it looks like there's friendly banter with their friend group, and their friends are maybe even being like, where are you? Where are you? Why aren't you answering? We might call the friends or we might text the friends and do some detective work that way. Um, in some cases, we try to confirm that the address on their ID is actually where they live and a safe place to go. And we will foot the bill and get them into an Uber or a cab if we can kind of be like, is this where you live? Do you feel safe going back there? And if they're like, yep, we might do that for them. I definitely recommend anyone who has a space where people are drinking, do have like a Uber business or a rideshare business or taxi vouchers on hand so that you can get people home in that way. Those are some kind of basic tips. Sometimes at festivals, we're able to have them in a space. This obviously isn't an option in a pub. But if it's more of a festival environment, a daytime festival, not a camping one, having a space where they can just be intoxicated until they rally a bit is a very useful tool. So it's sometimes called a chill zone or a sanctuary. I'm sure you're familiar with that term. Having a place where they can take a break until they rally a bit more and can give us that bit of information so that we can get them somewhere home. And what I want to avoid is obviously police, any type of emergency services. We really want to do everything we can before doing that. And my preference would be to ambulance them over drunk tanking them if I had to choose. But there have been points at the end of the night where I cannot leave this 19-year-old on Granville Street. I can't. So the ambulance feels like the only option left at 5 a.m. We've called a lot of parents. We found mom in a lot of phones and called moms. Yeah.
Just to follow up on that, there was also the comment about, have you seen the consent colored bracelets some places use? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think so. For those of you who don't know, there are some events that use a color-coded bracelet system, and the parameters of the bracelet system are clearly defined when people pick up the bracelet. So a green bracelet is, I'm here to mingle and meet people and maybe have consensual flirty banter. This is a sign to talk to me. A yellow might be, I'm going to be selective. I'm open to talking outside of my social circle. And a red is, I'm just here to be with my friends. I don't want to engage. And I think, my general take is most tools that allow people to communicate boundaries are helpful, generally speaking, with a broad brush. My long game is to really contribute to culture where we're just more free to talk about our boundaries and be receiving of people's no's. But I realize we're quite a ways off from that as a society. So I think honestly, any tool that gets people talking about consent and limits has a more of a net positive than it does a net negative. The adaption for, I think, festival industry, I've kind of adapted that concept in two ways. So less about what my social motivations might be and more about, so I've seen a bracelet used for people who absolutely do not want to be photographed. I think an uncomfortable reality, especially of music festivals and music events, is that there's often a disclaimer when you purchase your ticket of, by entering this space, you agree to be photographed. You acknowledge that this event will be photographed. And I think, there are people in our community who are perhaps dealing with stalkers or who are perhaps dealing or, fleeing domestic violence and don't want perhaps a previous violent partner to know what they do. And I think by having these broad consent, like you consent to be photographed by coming here, we are potentially making an environment where it really limits their social bubble. And so by maybe using a brightly colored bracelet, that is a flag of please don't photograph me. Or if you do by accident, don't publish me on the event page. I think that that's an important adaptation of that tool. And another way I've seen it adapted at kind of smaller music events is maybe someone comes to the harm reduction team and they say they spend some time there, they get grounded, and they want to go back out in Gen Pop. They want to go back wandering the festival grounds, but like, I don't know, I'm feeling very activated. Using a color-coded bracelet that just alerts staff. If you see a person with this neon orange bracelet, we're going to go out of our way to check on you. So if I see someone with that bracelet, I say, hey, I'm walking this way. Would you like me to walk with you for part of the way? It's just a well-known prompt at the event that people who are wearing that bracelet maybe need a little bit of extra support during their time with us.
Next question. This is actually a follow-up from the previous one that was regarding onset access of code of conduct and just the question about it being made department specific. The follow-up was, is production supposed to provide this? And then a follow-up to that was, i.e. the employer. Is the employer responsible to create this code?
Great question. So I kind of have two parts of this. One, in BC, if you're based in BC, and probably for most provinces, if you're not joining from BC, your employer is required to have a bullying and harassment policy. That is the legal requirement in BC. It's been that way since 2012. So over 10 years, Worksafe or workers' compensation legislation requires this bullying and harassment policy. This is often a multi-page document. There's no way you could write a bullying and harassment policy in under 3 pages. I think that's too ambitious. And so the short answer to your question is, code of conduct is not a requirement of any workplace, but the offering today is imagining it as a useful tool, addition or complement to these things. So it isn't a requirement, but it is a way to help, I think, actionize the key points of that behavior or of that respectful workplace policy. And there even is a way to write, because most workplace bullying and harassment policies open with what's it called, like a statement. A policy statement is often the first section of that policy. That policy statement can be what you have in the code of conduct, right? So it's not necessarily creating two different things. And then that policy statement is the part you pull out and poster and remind people of. And if someone violates it, you funnel them into that bullying and harassment policy. So yes, the short answer is codes of conduct not required. So then who does the responsibility fall on? Yeah, I mean, I've found it's usually initiated by a few squeaky wheels in the workplace. So some department heads who are like, I really want to make change in my department. And they will create one for their department, and often it will catch across. This is how I think all of the intersecting industries that are in this space maybe realize that all it takes is one doing something, maybe it's your competitor, for you to see that this is a good idea, right? If you are in a unionized space, your union may have a version of this or may take on wanting to create this for your union. So that could be a place where it originates. Yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah. And another, which may be a bit of a two-hander. What are your thoughts on blacklisting people with more severe violations along the sexual violence spectrum? If there's a circumstance in which you would recommend blacklisting, how do you recommend enforcing it? And then on a similar note, if there's time, how do you recommend addressing a report of an abusive individual that occurred off-site? In other words, if a patron makes a venue aware that their abuser will be coming to an event, how should a venue with a code of conduct respond?
Wow, Elizabeth, it's like, my most commonly asked question. This is by far the most commonly asked question, especially around events. So I'll try to answer it in concise terms as possible. So I think that as a team, as a company that is running essentially a for pay event, So you're not a community free, everyone welcome, hosted by the Parks Board event. If you're, a venue or a festival that's charging money for your event, you do have every right to essentially ban, I think is another way of saying ban people from coming to your event. That is a right that you hold, so long as it is behaviors based and not banning them due to a part of their identity, right? So we can't be like, you can't come because you're over 55, or you can't come to this event because you're this gender. That would be grounds for a human rights tribunal, right? We can't ban people from coming to our events based off of identity. However, if there is well-documented behavioral situations that would cause undue risk to your event, you are allowed to tell them that they can't come. My kind of take on this is these things are not things that should be issued willy-nilly. But if you have had a code of conduct, they repeatedly have violated it, they show no interest in changing their behavior, it could cause you undue financial strain because you might have to bring in more security. Security or staff might get hung up monitoring their behavior. And so because of that, it is well within your rights to say, you've been told about our code of conduct, we've had to eject you from our last 2 events. You are not welcome at our events for a minimum of a year. You can reach out in a year and we'll talk to it, but you cannot come due to your behavior on these dates. So in order to really enforce this in a way that is sound and above board, you need to have documentation. So if you had to remove someone, you need to have a system in place where that is all captured. So all of your staff know, so that you have that to fall back on. And then the part 2, this is probably working on festivals, this is the most challenging, I think, in relation to protective spaces or safer spaces, is what about the people who want the person who harmed them, totally unrelated to the event, not to be at the same event as them? And I don't have one solid answer to this. Anyone who works in larger scale events might be seeing this comment and just know that it's not that simple. Once you open the door for banning people for things that have nothing to do with your event, they don't involve your staff, they don't involve your performers, they don't involve your crew, they didn't happen at the event, they didn't happen, they happened 2 years ago in a different city. Once you open up that door of implementing bans for that, it can be a bit of a trickier slope, and it can create a lot of work for your team that they necessarily isn't within the scope of their contract. So I think you have to put together a bit of a risk assessment questionnaire for your event. And my advice here would be case by case. If someone comes to me and they have, a Google Doc that they prepared because they've been navigating this violent conflict for years and years and years, I'm going to avoid the word evidence because I am not the police. I don't like determining evidence. But if they're able to demonstrate that there is a significant safety risk, I think that I would probably consider a ban for that. If it's kind of vague and an ongoing issue, this might just not be the event for them because I can't guarantee that they will feel safe here. I can work with them to create a safety plan. Okay, I am unable to ban them for something that has nothing to do with the festival. We just can't. However, let's you and I create a safety plan, because if they target you at the festival and they violate the code of conduct, that is an easy removal. That is for sure. Or if you're at the festival and you're thinking about this incident and you're having anxiety, how can we support you? So if I can't offer a ban, what can I offer on site? I think we have to remember, especially in the context of events are a moment in time, and we have to be realistic about what we're asking staff to do. And I think, at the various events I work, I want everyone to feel like they can come to our event, but I have to be realistic with what my job is and what I can resource well and efficiently. And I think it's asking a lot for my staff to become the arbiter of potentially conflicts that um like didn't directly involve the festival. It's just it's risky. And I think your approach can be case by case, based on risk, resources, documented history. Another advice could be, is it possible for you to get a no contact order? If you have a no contact order, if your safety is threatened by someone, and that's possible, then we have to enforce it at the event also, is another avenue. I hope that answers your question. I feel like we could talk about that for a long time. You're welcome to.
That's a challenging question, and I think you addressed it as best as possible. I'm glad we had time to address it too. I see one more that I think we might be able to sneak time in really quickly, and that is, could the code of conduct offer respecting someone's request for space?
Yes, this is actually, Jesse, one of my favorite lines to use as an ask, or if we're putting it in like the no terms, like not respecting someone's request for space. I love this because space also, like physical space or like emotional space. Like I've asked for you to distance yourself from me and you're not honoring that. So that's one of my actual favorite lines to use in helping people write codes of conduct.
Wonderful. Wonderful. All right, we are about 5 minutes away from our scheduled end of the webinar, and it looks like we've reached the end of the questions. If another question should come in just a moment, then we might be able to quickly address it. While I still have everyone's attention, I just wanted to quickly throw up this QR code here for our feedback and evaluation survey. We would really value your input as far as how this webinar served you, as well as maybe how it didn't, what we could have done differently, or maybe topics for future webinars. Any thoughts, suggestions, or comments like that are especially valuable to us here at Actsafe. We do aim to host webinars of various topics at least once per quarter, sometimes more so. And we definitely tailor them based on demand or subjects that are constantly brought to our attention for support, such as, supporting venues and festivals with the new dynamics of crowds and crowd psychology post-pandemic. That's something that we've heard time and time again here at Actsafe, which is why we were so thrilled to have Stacey attend and deliver this incredible webinar today. So if you would be so kind, I'll leave that QR code there for a moment. I see a couple of things popping up now in the chat, so I'll read through that. First one is, curious about this line from a music festival site: intention and impact can be different, but both are worthy of consideration. This requires our entire community to be observant and open to signs of discomfort in others. What are your thoughts on that? Oh, sorry, Stacey, you're muted.
It had to happen once. I just can't make it through a session without doing that. Yeah, I think this could open up a whole other digression of a different session, but removed from the context of the bigger document, I actually like this. I think that it's a call to action for everyone to be mindful of how their behavior could be impacting others. I am personally of the belief that, like, yes, impact carries more weight than intention, but I think it is important to consider intention. I think intention, when we are curious about people's intentions, we open up the door for teachable moments. And so I like that they've included this. I have seen some very strong binary takes on intent versus impact. And so I love that addition. I think that if we were thinking about the spectrum of sexual violence and consent violations, I am of the opinion that a significant proportion of consent violations are not done with the intent to harm someone. They're due to failure to communicate or failure to, listen or things like that. So I feel like this could be a whole other Stacey hot take special, but I really like that. I really like that line, that call to action to be paying attention to others. It's not just about your experience of the music festival. We want to be seeing how others are. And then I see a nice wrap-up question from Marty.
Yes.
How can folks who would like to get involved with Good Night Out volunteering work? Your best bet is to email. In case you didn't catch it when the slide was up, there it is there, but it will also be, it's in the materials that I've prepared for you following that QR code.
Yes, that is a great wrap-up question. Thanks for asking, Marty. There's that QR code one more time. I would encourage anybody wanting to share their thoughts to do it right away while the experience is still so fresh in your mind. Lastly, I'll just throw up one more slide on Actsafe. There you can see contact information for myself as well as Murat Alexander, who's another in-house safety advisor. You can also reach out to us with any general inquiries at the email on the top right corner there, which is info@actsafe.ca, and the phone number is listed there as well for our front desk. So without further ado, I just want to say thank you to everyone who attended today, those of you who are still here, and especially a great thank you to Stacey. Thank you so much for this fantastic webinar. We're so grateful to have you supporting us with this kind of information and all the services that you offer through Good Night Out. You're an incredible organization, and we're so grateful and thrilled to be working with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and thank you everyone for staying till the end and bringing your super generous questions. I really appreciate it.
Excellent. All right, well, take care, everyone. We'll see you again next time.